Yeah, well, that's fun fact. That was the theme of the Green IO conference in New York just 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, actually, maybe 3 weeks when you will release the podcast. Um, and that was the title was AI, a controversial force for sustainability. On one hand, it is absolutely obvious that the way LLM backed models, because I'm very cautious about the word AI, sorry, is deployed is completely unresponsible. It is mostly driven by a very, I would say, American culture of bigger is better without much consideration for smaller approach and which can be as efficient. It's really this sort of it's almost a cultural
Hmm.
fact that the US
Interesting.
wanted big. And, you know, coming back from New York, I mean, a lot of people there are just waiting for the next big thing, and everything needs to be big. But that's a cultural trait in the US. That's not necessarily how we should run the world. And the problem is today, obviously, US big tech is leading the dance on AI. And so we tend to follow what they call frontier model, like bigger, better, always better, and so on and so on. And the truth is, you've got alternatives, and DeepSeek was a very interesting one. I'm not want to enter the debate whether it was partially or totally spy more upon the US, but
Let's use the neutral
let's park
term,
this one.
leveraged on the technology of.
Leverage, yeah, that's a very polite way to say. But my point is not here that good enough is most of the time enough. Now, the way AI is pushed today is completely unresponsible. We are talking about investment that are simply not possible, physically speaking, because the electricity grid won't permit it. Because today you cannot even buy enough diesel generator to temporarily power your data centers, because the way hyperscaler, especially in the US and in other areas of the world, are pushing for new for new locations is completely um, irrespectful of local communities. I mean, everyone knows about the infamous X data center in Memphis, powered by Elon Musk company, where you've got more than 30 diesel generators running 24/7 and polluting the air of the entire neighborhood, which happened to be a poor neighborhood. So people are less organized, and they've got less money to unionize and to go to lawyers and fight back, even if they are actually fighting back. And the fact is, they didn't even have a license to operate. It was, better say sorry than ask for permission. That was really the way Elon Musk handled this one, and it emits a lot of carbon emission. And regarding the overall consumption of electricity, at the moment, the trends are very worrying. We're talking about doubling, maybe tripling the amount of LNG being consumed by the tech industry, mostly because of AI compute inference time. And it could easily go beyond the overall AI consumption around the world, go uh, above the overall electricity consumption of Germany, which is an industrial powerhouse. So it's not small potatoes.
I think it's number four, number five global economy right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. And but what is completely crazy is that suddenly people from the tech industry, which tends to live in their own narrative of cloud and unmaterial world and so on, realize that you've got good old electricity engineers telling them, I cannot plug you. And we see in Ireland at the moment 30 data center projects have been put on hold by the electricity national provider, saying either you manage to produce your own electricity or we won't plug you to the grid, because already data centers in Ireland consume as much energy as urban households. So this is pretty big. So it has done in a very unresponsible way because of this narrative of bigger is better, and that we will see after. The important things is to become first, to be the first one to achieve general AI and this sort of fairy tale. But that doesn't mean that all these tools labeled AI, starting with LLM and generative AI and good old AI models like machine
Mhm.
learning and deep learning and so on, cannot be beneficial for humankind. And we had a pretty impressive demo by an MIT researcher at Green New York just a few weeks ago, managing to um, um, sorry, I'm forgetting the technical word she used, but she basically managed to map the entire city of Phoenix based on different data sources, satellite images, images from, the Google Street Map view and so on.
Sensors, video cameras, and so on.
Absolutely. And managing to simulate heat waves and the impact of heat waves at building levels and floor levels for each building of the city. And that changes completely the quality of urban planning because it's not just like, oh, let's protect Phoenix against heat wave. And we know
Hmm.
this city is pretty at risk. It's, oh, let's make sure that actually we have these 5 big blocks of buildings that are getting hotter way faster than others and actually um, having a chain reaction, and like the hotter your neighbor building gets, obviously the hotter your own building will go and so on. And being able also to micro adjust the answer from a urban planning perspective. And also they've been now, MIT has been partnering with Harvard Law School, sorry, and not business school, but the law school. And lawyers are now adapting citizens' rights to make sure that with their simulations, um, uh, city councils are taken, I mean, are made responsible to protect their citizens against
Hmm.
these heat waves in a much more proactive way than just, hey, this is heat, this is bad. Because actually, it really depends the sort of neighborhood, the sort of materials. And honestly, I mean, you can see the slides on the greenio.tech website, and it's bluffing. I was amazed. And that was really using generative AI technology like LLM, many others, but LLM as well. And we cannot not see many other applications. Most of them today in sustainability are more related to good old machine learning and deep learning than truly generative AI. But we cannot dismiss the fact that generative AI can bring a lot of things. Now, when you talk to researchers, academics, activists about it, most of the time they will tell you, well, we use open source model that are small model because you don't really know if you want to modelize the way fisheries, for instance, will react to a local pollution. Most of the time, you don't need a model that knows how to speak Chinese and Arabic or even English. You see what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's a question of being a bit more frugal, and I know that a lot of people are uncomfortable with the word, but by frugal I mean just good old common sense. That I don't need the biggest and brightest model. I don't need the biggest and brightest token schema for most of the time running my operations. And sorry if I was a bit too long on this one, but I
No,
really
but
want
it's
to get a nuanced
very,
answer here. Mm.
very insightful as well. Um, I'll leave it for a second interview, second discussion. The whole topic of do we forget about Moore's law and do we really have the right math
Yeah.
for AI? I don't think we do. We partially there, not completely there. We still at the algorithmic level, we're still missing. But let's leave it for another conversation. It will be amazing. Um, Moving a little bit more into engineering and infrastructure, and I think we talked about green software practices before we connected to, or when we connecting today, we talked also about the supply chain, the
Mm.
role of uh, adjusting, if you want, the supply chain to sustainability. And the observation I can make there is typically supply chain previously was a contractual obligation between the customer and the supplier, with the data flowing pretty much one way. It's like deliver this in these conditions, these colors, this quality, this price, and the response, yes, yes, we're going to do it. Or now with sustainability, the data flows are becoming much more important, not only from the customer to the supplier, but also from the supplier to the customer, because sustainability data, such as carbon footprint, it's actually not only the data, the carbon footprint depends on the supplier. So long question, but when we delve into technology, uh, into the engineering rather, you mentioned green software, and I think we can take it from there to supply chain.
Yeah, well, maybe green software will be a bit too technical, because there are ways, obviously, for in the way we build and maintain software, there are ways to avoid wasteful patterns, whether it's energy overconsumption or not paying attention to the carbon intensity of the energy we use. I think the Green Software Foundation, which has a very strong lead on these topics, and they do a remarkable job, tend to coin it in three pillars, which is the energy intensity of your software, the carbon intensity of the energy you use, and then the hardware intensity of your software. And by that, it means that if your software requires 3 times more servers to run, then obviously it will create a lot of overconsumption in energy and overconsumption in the embedded carbon, because they tend to focus a lot on carbon. So this is usually the 3 good questions that we can ask. Now, that being said, and I'd like to circle back what you said about the supply chain. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The supply chain in tech today is incredibly unbalanced in favor of the suppliers. We are talking about an oligopoly. We are talking about companies that don't care about the sustainability requirements. I've been working, one of my clients was one of the largest tourist operator in France and actually in Europe. And when we drafted the procurement to renew the very big contract that they had with one of the top 3 hyperscaler, and they listed a lot of requirements, carbon intensity of this, carbon intensity of that. We want to have a detailed breakdown of this software per user, per this, per that. And the answer was, read our sustainability report. But that was not the question. But that will be our answer, because we don't really care. So I think it's very important to acknowledge for any business leader that when it comes to tech today, the balance of power has shifted. Actually, that will be an episode that I'm going to record next week with Ophélie Coelho, and she's a specialist in the geopolitics of tech. And she nailed several concepts about where the concentration happens and how it can be an infrastructure concentration, it can be a software concentration, it can be a scientific knowledge concentration that at some point create oligopoles, a very handful of companies that own extra power and extra bargaining power. So why am I saying this is that it's important if you're a business leader and you work closely with your CIO or your CTO and you say, I want to be sustainable from even a business perspective. The truth is today, the big tech actors are not that transparent. They will claim they are, but if we follow strict scientific definition of what is transparency, so open data, where we can replicate the findings and so on, this is not transparent at all. And they tend to provide aggregated data, not detailed data, which looks nice in end of year reporting, but that are not that much useful for engineers and procurement teams to work on. So today, the question on where we host our data is almost the only leverage we have with these big suppliers, because all of them, they will provide you regions. And if you work with AWS, if you work with Microsoft, if you work with Google, you can choose the region where your data will be hosted, which matter quite a lot
Sure.
actually for sovereignty, sorry, issues.
Sovereignty and also
Yeah,
legal.
and legal.
Countries don't allow citizens' data to be shared across
But
borders.
it's also very, very important from a sustainability perspective because if you look at the sustainability report of Amazon or Google, they will tell you everything is fine because we 100% of our energy is green. But the truth is absolutely not because it's a market based way of making the math, which is we buy that amount of green energy, which doesn't exist, by the way, it's low carbon energy. And this, because we buy this amount of energy, which don't directly power our data centers, but we buy that amount and we consume a bit less, then we consider that we are net zero
Sure.
or even net positive. That's a market way. That's an accounting trick. Don't get me wrong, it has its usefulness
Yeah.
because it has driven a lot of investment in renewable energy. So I'm not saying this is all bad, but from an operational perspective, this is completely wrong. The truth is that a data center will be powered by the electricity grid where it is. And if the electricity grid is highly carbon intensive or water intensive, then our compute, our data, or digital services will be powered by dirty energy and
Mhm.
dirty electricity. So first leg of my answer will be really pay attention to where we host our services and so on, and maybe pay the little extra price sometimes to host. If you're in Europe, for instance, it's way better to host the data in France or in Scandinavia countries than in Poland or quite often in Ireland because the carbon intensity of their grid is not just good enough. And maybe from time to time, it's interesting to pay attention to when, because, for instance, the UK is very good with wind energy, and at some moment of the day, they're 100% powered by renewable energy. So it might make sense at this moment of the day to train huge model or huge batch and so on. Now, that being said, the second leg of my reasoning is that whenever it's possible, consider smaller, more specialized provider, but also for having a bit more bargaining power with them. And we do have in Europe, we do have in the US, we do have around the world smaller IT operators, smaller data center operators that will be a bit more transparent on the energy they use, the energy intensity of the infrastructure, the water they use, and so on. And from a wide sustainability perspective, it's better. It's better for the carbon footprint, the water footprint, the energy footprint, but it's also better for the sustainability of the business because we have more bargaining power. We are a client, not just a drop of the in the ocean of their profits. And really, I
Mhm.
mean it. I used to pay millions, and I really mean millions, if not actually a bit more than millions, dozens of millions of euros per year to Amazon Web Service when I was running a very large operation for a German company. They were very nice, very polite, very professional when it comes to the tech side of their business. But when it comes to the sustainability side, and when we start asking, well, can we have some proof that we run on renewable energy and so on, they will always push back to the sustainability report saying, look, all the amazing things that we're doing. And despite me considering myself as a big customer, I was nothing for them enough to move into that direction because obviously it would have created quite a lot of mayhem internally if they really had to provide super detailed numbers. So great teams, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed working with them, but from a sustainability perspective, that was really a challenge. And if I knew all of this when I was CTO, I think I would have diversified a bit more my suppliers and
Mhm.
not every digital services need to be hosted by such high quality tier as the main hyperscalers. So that's also something to consider.
And what we're doing in AKFI, we're coming from the view that this at least these requirements have to be part of the supply agreement. So we are
Yeah, great.
looking to create forms that are at least now you are in the legal space where you're saying you sign to that, show the goods. The other thought, in the past, not in the future. But you still, these hyperscalers still compete a lot. You mentioned about the competition. So sometimes it's good to push a little bit here, push a little bit there until one of
Agree.
them says, "I will comply," even if their size it's they tend not to do it, but definitely very good examples on how the supply chain extremely important has power, especially after events like COVID and uh,
Mm.
wars and so on. And so it's a limited supply versus demand, and this is one of the
Agree.
imbalances that probably was discussed in New York with the.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was even discussed in a CERN conference where some very big purchasers of IT equipment in the academic world, in the research world, even in the US, were saying that basically we cannot buy GPU and we cannot buy CPU anymore because it's getting way too expensive. Our budgets and the price
the
velocity is so crazy that we cannot keep up because we've got strict process to use
Sure.
that is public
Yeah,
money. So that was very concerning. And I would like to bounce back on what you said about the supply chain. There is today a lack of structured framework to require from willing enough supplier, IT supplier to provide proofs of how sustainable, how carbon aware, how not wasteful they are. But we are seeing several initiatives, and maybe I want to mention one, which is a high demand from the procurement teams in IT, which is having some certification for cloud providers. And TCO, which I believe many of your audience will know because they're pretty famous to purchase sustainable electronic devices. They've been in discussion for more than a year now. I think the first discussion started at Green Night London a year ago or even a year and a half ago. And they are building a certification process for cloud providers to prove that they are sustainable and compliant and more than sustainable, like ESG compliant in many aspects. I don't know if they will manage to get the certification adopted by many, I would say, second tier data center or cloud service providers. I don't believe that Microsoft or Amazon or Google will get certified soon, but maybe I hope they will prove me wrong. But you have a lot of other actors that could be interested, and I think it will send a very clear signal because we need this signal. Because if every buyer send to an IT providers different requirements, different format, etc., etc., it gets very complicated for the IT providers, the cloud services operators to comply to all of these different requests. And I do believe in the power of standardization and having clear requirements and some standards that everyone can rely on, even if you've got different grading, like your entry level, medium, expert, cutting edge, whatever.
no, absolutely, and no, thank you for taking this perspective on the supply chain. As I said, we working trying to get the industry to recognize the need for a standard, and we foresee that the standard has to start at the way the framework agreements are made,
Hmm.
because we see too many times we say, well, no worries, AI will solve this, and I say, so how do you get the data
Yeah,
for your AI? And so we forget about the human element of the transaction, essentially.
agree, agree.
Um, I have so many questions left that I would like to invite you back, but we usually close with a piece of advice for and recommendations for to groups, if you want, students and new grads and professionals in mid-career. I'm sure you experienced. I am one of them. I venture to say you are one of them
I am
that
one
make
of
a
them, actually.
decision to go to sustainability. What would you advise to these two groups? Should they have a
Uh,
career in sustainability? Yes or no? Let's start simple.
yes, yes. That's still waking up every morning and doing things that you know you will be able to defend in front of your children in 20 years' time, it's priceless. And this is what I decided to leave a very well-paid job to do today, activities that are not money-driven. I would put it that way.
Sure.
So it creates peace of mind, and I also believe that when it's done pragmatically, you can make a living on it. You might not, yeah, earn millions, but you can make good, decent, honest living with it. That being said, I think it's important to I always say it when I do the opening remarks of my conferences, but the first one is really start from where you are, not where you should be, and that's true for a student, that's true for a citizen, that's true for a business leader. We are all late. We should have done things 20, 30 years ago to boost the energy transition, the fight against climate change, the plastic pollutions. We've wasted dozens of years, decades. That's done. Okay. So now let's start from where we are, and let's not have this huge wave of culpability or waste feeling that we wasted opportunities to prevent us doing things. So really start from where we are. And I would say that the second thing is being very pragmatic. If we have the chance to work in a big corporations, to have still have some sustainability, some budgets, sorry, allocated to sustainability, be ambitious, feed the open source community, feed the research, feed the initiatives that like yours to build open tools, commons such as frameworks, standards, share your data when they're not business critical. Now, most of the time, if we are working in a smaller company or we are freelancer, let's be very pragmatic. Start by following the money. Reducing cost is usually a good way to be more sustainable, and then track the energy, or when we use AI, track the token use, and make sure to remember that each token costs energy. So the less we use them, the less wasteful we are. And be very transparent. That will be my third piece of advice, and humble. That most of the time in sustainability, it depends. Something that we do in one company, in a certain country, at a certain time, in a certain industry, will be a very bad idea in another country, in another company, in another industry. So we should be humble and transparent and say, well, this is what I'm trying to achieve. That might work, that might not work. That worked for me, that will not necessarily work for my neighbors, which paradoxically is something that is important, that explains the need to share and say, well, we've done this and we achieved pretty good results to reduce the energy. Yeah, but what you've done is you shut down your servers, two-thirds of your servers during the night. Fair enough, but we are hospitality. We cannot do that. Or we are critical public services. We cannot do that. But on the
Healthcare.
other end, what we've done is that we've run a public campaign asking people to consume less of these services or do it in a more clever way. And the other company would answer, oh, well, but I cannot really ask that to my customers, because I pledge them my business value is high quality services, and literally not having this cognitive load on their mind anymore. So if I ask them to pay attention to this and this and that, that will hit my business goals. So it's more something that I need to do internally. This sort of discussion should happen all the time, and no one is right or wrong. I mean, it is really a question of being pragmatic and doing things rooted in where we are. by paying attention to the true impact indicators, which are we really need to reduce our carbon emissions. We really need to be resilient because the climate will hit us hard in the forthcoming decades. We should really pay attention to water. We should really build more resilient businesses, because what we believe to be exceptional situations today will be
Normal.
very commonplace situations in a few decades, even in a few years from now.
I think what you, if I may add, if you allow me to add, but
Absolutely.
I think I see the needle moving from generalist and idealist, right? We boiling the oceans, we frying the planet, and so on. We see much less of these extreme messages, and we see a move toward the pragmatists, to people that are starting to solve, as you said, part of the problem. It's a complex environment. We talk about system thinking. I don't think we know many other complex systems than a planetary system. So it's trying to say we'll fix it by doing A, B, or C.
It is a pretty big one.
Yeah, we and
Well,
it's agnostic of humans, right?
I would say, Manuel, that um, I would like to clarify what I said, because I'm still very maximalist in certain areas. I believe that the playing field for businesses at continent level, and if possible at planet level, should be way stricter, and that we should have way more regulations and way more transparency being required from everyone. But when I say this, I say it as a citizen, as a European citizen, as a global citizen, and I'm asking this to the politicians, to the world leaders, because they should be the one delivering it. So yes, literally our oceans are still boiling. And this is really, really scary. And this is scary for hundreds of millions of people that can die from it because of extreme weather, even because of shortage of fishes and many, many other things. Now, when we are professionals working in a certain environment, I believe that we should adapt. And we can still say at the coffee break, or even in the introduction of any good presentations related to sustainability, the situation is crazy serious. Now, once we have said this, once we have acknowledged this, can I really ask you to divide by three your profit margin to deal with it? At the moment, it's not possible. Even if the best willing CEO in the world
Sure.
willing to do that will last 3 months, and then we get fired. So, of course, this is the moment we need to get pragmatic. And actually, the results, because a lot of results will be achieved by companies and by professionals when they start being serious about sustainability, will feed the political action saying, look, this is possible. But now we're hitting some limits. We cannot reduce the wasteful behaviors. We cannot reduce the energy consumptions if you don't help us level the field. If you don't help us maybe sometimes protecting our industry against industries in other countries that are not playing by these rules. And this sort of dialogue, positive dialogues, is what should happen. And it's nonsense to ask people to act on things that they don't have the lever upon.
Absolutely. So I think you connected the dots between what I was saying, which is by generalist and idealist, I mean, you give a problem, and my impression was you maximize, not ma but you are realistic about the problem, but you don't have a solution. And to come up with a solution, like many things we do in technologies, in business, you have to parse the problem in smaller pieces and solve one piece at a time, or and understand the interconnection of the pieces. And that's
Yeah.
what I meant by pragmatism. It's not to deny that the ocean becomes more acid or warmer, and we see it. The,
Mm.
the other thought is, while the problem looking at global scale is global, it's always also local, right? There are fisheries
Agree.
that are suffering. I won't say they don't care about the icebergs, but maybe they're not immediate. a threat to them. It's more a threat, the lack of subsistence.
I agree, and I love to see that I'm talking to a pragmatic system thinker, because you said, divide in smaller pieces, but be aware of the connections between them, and that's all the difficulty of the exercise. I agree with you.
For full confession, and we'll leave it here. I got a corner certificate in system thinking, so uh, and being an engineer in general, you need to learn systems and subsystems. Is the way
Yeah,
we thought as well. But I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with us today.
you're
For
welcome,
our
Manuel.
audience, thank you. Make sure that you tune in every week for a new episode of AKFI Actionable ESG Talk series. You'll gain new perspectives on how to mitigate risks and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. We had a very great discussion today. So until next week, goodbye from Manuel and Gaia. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Goodbye.